To handle her daughter's failures, the Empress passed them to a human. The Empress's decree. The palace of Empress Calith floated above the azure oceans of Velthra, its crystalline spires catching the light of twin suns. Inside the grand audience chamber, where walls shimmered with captured starlight, the Empress sat upon her throne with the bearing of one who had ruled for 3 decades without compromise. Dorian Vale stood before her, his simple scholar's robes contrasting sharply with the opulence surrounding him. He had traveled 2 weeks across the void to reach this moment, summoned by urgent message to the imperial court. His reputation as an educator had somehow reached even this distant world. Master Vale, the Empress began, her voice carrying the musical quality of her people, I have a problem that requires unconventional solutions. Dorian inclined his head respectfully. I'm honored you considered me, Your Majesty. The Empress's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. My daughters have become impossible. Tessir ignores her diplomatic tutors. Vanna dreams instead of learning protocol. And Raina. She paused, as if the very thought exhausted her. Raina has been expelled from 3 separate academies. Before Dorian could respond, doors burst open. 3 young women entered, each moving with distinct purpose. The first, Tessir, walked with measured grace, her eyes coldly assessing Dorian. The second, Vanna, drifted in almost absently, paint still staining her fingers. The third, Raina, strode forward with chin raised defiantly, her auburn hair caught in a careless braid. This is the human? Raina asked, circling Dorian like a predator examining prey. He looks ordinary enough. Raina, please, the Empress said wearily. Dorian smiled slightly. Ordinary is sometimes exactly what's needed. Tessir's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. Mother, this is your grand solution? A human scholar to teach us what dozens of our own people could not. Perhaps that's precisely why he'll succeed, Calith replied. You will spend the next 3 months under Master Vale's instruction. He will prepare you for your roles as representatives of our empire. You will cooperate. The last 2 words carried unmistakable weight. Vanna spoke softly, her voice like wind through chimes. Will he at least be interesting? Dorian met her curious gaze. I promise to try. Raina stepped closer, studying his face with unsettling intensity. We'll see how long you last, human. The others never made it past a month. As she turned away, Dorian caught a glimpse of something beneath her bravado, a flash of pain, of isolation. He recognized it because he'd felt it himself once, before finding purpose in teaching. The Empress dismissed them with a gesture. As the princesses departed, Calith leaned forward slightly. Dorian Vale, I am giving you authority I've granted no other. Succeed where I have failed. Help them become who they need to be. Dorian bowed. I'll do everything I can, Your Majesty. But as he left the audience chamber, he wondered if he'd just accepted an impossible task. 3 royal daughters, each struggling in her own way, each building walls against a world that demanded perfection. He'd taught challenging students before, but never in a floating palace light years from home, and never with stakes quite this high. Lessons and boundaries. The first week tested Dorian's patience in ways he hadn't anticipated. Each princess required a completely different approach, and none made it easy. Tessir met him in the strategy room each morning, where holographic star maps floated between them like glowing constellations. She answered his questions with cold precision, always technically correct but emotionally distant. You understand the treaties, Dorian observed during their 4th session, but do you understand the people who signed them? Her eyes narrowed. Understanding is inefficient. Facts matter, feelings don't. Then why does your mother worry about you? He asked gently. For the first time, Tessir's composure cracked. She dismissed the holograms with a wave, leaving them in sudden darkness. Session over. Vanna proved equally challenging in opposite ways. She'd arrive at their afternoon sessions with paint-stained clothing, her mind clearly elsewhere. When Dorian tried discussing diplomatic correspondence, she'd sketch his face instead of taking notes. You have talent, he said, examining her drawings. Talent my mother considers wasteful. Vanna's voice carried old hurt. Princesses don't become artists. Perhaps they should, Dorian suggested, which earned him her first genuine smile. But Raina was something else entirely. She arrived late to every session, challenged every statement he made, and seemed determined to prove him inadequate. During their third meeting, when he tried teaching proper formal introductions, she deliberately introduced herself to an imaginary ambassador as Raina the Rebellious, destroyer of expectations. "Is that really necessary?" Dorian asked, fighting a smile. "Is any of this necessary?" she shot back. "These ridiculous rules, these performance expectations. I didn't ask to be born royal. Neither did your sisters, yet they're trying." "They're pretending," Raina said, her voice sharp. "Tessier's hiding. Vanna's escaping. I'm the only one being honest about how much I hate this." She stormed from the study chamber, leaving Dorian alone with scattered tablets and abandoned lessons. He sat there for a long moment, then made a decision that probably violated protocol. He followed her. The palace gardens existed in a massive transparent dome, where Velthran flowers bloomed in impossible colors. He found Raina sitting beneath a tree with silver leaves, her anger already cooling into something sadder. "Go away," she said without looking at him. Dorian sat down anyway, leaving respectful distance between them. "I had a student once who reminded me of you. Brilliant, angry, convinced the world was against her. Let me guess, you inspired her to see things differently, and now she's perfectly adjusted and grateful. Actually, she dropped out and became a musician. Last I heard, she's quite happy." He plucked a fallen silver leaf from the ground. "Not everyone's path looks the same." Raina finally turned to look at him, surprise replacing her defensive posture. "You're not going to lecture me about duty and responsibility? Would it help if I did?" She almost laughed. "No." They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Above them, through the dome, one of Velthra's moons rose early, casting pale light across the gardens. "I don't hate learning," Raina admitted quietly. "I hate feeling like I'm being shaped into something I'm not. Like who I am isn't good enough." Dorian understood that feeling more than she knew. "Then maybe we focus on enhancing who you are, rather than replacing you." She met his eyes, something shifting in her expression. Curiosity, perhaps, or the tentative beginning of trust. "You really think that's possible?" "I think it's the only way forward." Shifting tides. 6 weeks into his tenure, Dorian realized he'd stopped thinking of the assignment as merely professional. The palace had become familiar, its crystalline corridors feeling less alien each day. More concerning, the princesses had stopped being simply students and had become individuals he genuinely cared about. Tessier sought him out one morning before their scheduled session, something she'd never done. "I need your opinion," she said, unusually hesitant. "Not as my instructor. As someone who sees things differently." They walked through the Eastern Gallery, where portraits of past rulers watched with stern expressions. Tessier explained her fear of becoming like them, powerful but isolated, respected but never truly known. "You're already different," Dorian assured her. "You're asking these questions. They probably never did." She smiled then, briefly, and Dorian glimpsed the woman beneath the defensive armor. Vanna had begun leaving her paintings in the study chamber for him to find. Each one revealed something new, her loneliness, her dreams, her quiet observation of the world around her. When he mentioned them during a session, she blushed. "They're not very good," she deflected. "They're honest," he replied. "That makes them better than good." She looked at him with such gratitude that he understood how rarely anyone truly saw her work, truly saw her. But it was Raina who occupied his thoughts most dangerously. Their debates had evolved into genuine conversations. She challenged him constantly, but now with curiosity rather than hostility. She'd started arriving on time, even early, lingering after sessions to continue discussions. One evening, as they reviewed interplanetary trade agreements, she suddenly asked, "Why did you really come here? The money can't be worth being so far from home." Dorian set down his tablet. "Honestly, I was restless. I'd been teaching the same courses, seeing the same faces. I wanted to matter in a different way. And do you? Matter here, I mean. I think so, he said, meeting her eyes. At least, I hope so. Something in the air shifted. Raina looked away first, color rising in her cheeks. You do. For what it's worth. The next day, the Empress announced a traditional Velthran celebration, the Festival of Luminous Paths, honoring their ancestors who'd first traveled between stars. The palace filled with visiting dignitaries, and Dorian suddenly understood the pressure the princesses faced. Every gesture scrutinized, every word weighed. Raina found him on a balcony overlooking the festivities, escaping the crowds inside. She wore ceremonial robes that shimmered like captured starlight, her hair arranged in elaborate braids he'd never seen before. You look beautiful, he said before he could stop himself. She turned, surprise and pleasure mingling in her expression. Thank you. Though I feel like a decorated statue. The statue metaphor again, Dorian smiled. You use it often. Because it's accurate. We're meant to be admired from a distance, never touched, never real. She moved closer to the railing, gazing at the stars visible beyond the dome. Do you know what I envy most about you? What? Choice. You chose to come here, to teach, to leave when the time comes. Everything in my life was decided before I drew my first breath. Dorian felt the weight of her words. Not everything. You're choosing who to become within those constraints. That takes more courage than I've ever needed. She looked at him then, really looked at him, and Dorian felt something shift irrevocably between them. The professional distance he'd carefully maintained began crumbling. I need to ask you something, Raina said, her voice barely above a whisper. And I need you to be honest. His heart rate quickened. All right. Do you ever think about me when we're not in lessons? Not as your student, but as... She trailed off, vulnerability replacing her usual confidence. Dorian knew he should lie. Should redirect. Should maintain the boundaries that protected them both. Instead, he found himself saying, yes. More than I should. The admission hung between them like a physical thing. Inside, music swelled as dancers began a traditional performance. Out here, the universe wheeled silently overhead. The festival tradition, Raina said quietly, not moving away, is that we teach guests our dances. Would you let me teach you? Every instinct screamed that this was dangerous territory. But looking at her, seeing hope and fear and longing mixed in her expression, Dorian found himself nodding. She took his hand, the first time they'd touched beyond accidental brushes, and guided it to her waist. Her other hand found his shoulder. It's simple. Just follow my lead. But there was nothing simple about the way she felt in his arms, the way she looked at him as they moved in slow circles on the empty balcony. The music from inside provided rhythm, but they created their own world in that moment. This is a terrible idea, Dorian murmured. I know, Raina replied, not pulling away. But I'm tired of good ideas that make me miserable. Her hand tightened on his shoulder. His fingers pressed more firmly against her waist. They were no longer dancing so much as swaying, drawn together by gravity neither could resist. Raina, he whispered, a warning and a plea. I know, she repeated. I know all the reasons we can't. But right now, in this moment, can we pretend the reasons don't exist? Before Dorian could answer, before he could remember all the ethical lines he was crossing, she leaned up and kissed his cheek, featherlight and devastating. Then she stepped back, composure settling over her like a mask. Thank you for the dance, Master Vale. I should return to the celebration. She left him there, heart racing, world tilted on its axis, knowing that everything had just become infinitely more complicated. Retry Claude can make mistakes. Please double-check responses. Forbidden moments. 2 months had passed, and the palace felt different now. Tessir engaged in genuine discussions about leadership philosophy. Vanna had begun designing cultural exchange programs that incorporated art. And Raina had become someone Dorian thought about far too often. Their evening sessions had evolved beyond formal lessons. They debated ethics and philosophy, shared stories of their different worlds, laughed over cultural misunderstandings. Dorian found himself waiting for these hours with an anticipation that troubled him. Tonight, they sat in the observatory, surrounded by transparent walls that revealed the cosmos in breathtaking detail. Raina was supposed to be practicing diplomatic speeches, but she'd abandoned her notes an hour ago. "Tell me about Earth again," she said, curled in her chair with uncharacteristic softness. "About the ocean where you grew up." Dorian leaned back, studying the nebulae swirling beyond the glass. "Cold, grey, always moving. I'd walk the shore every morning before classes, watching the waves. It helped me think. I'd like to see it someday." Her voice held a wistfulness that made his chest tighten. "Raina," he began, then hesitated. She turned to face him fully, and something in her expression had changed. Gone was the defensive princess or the curious student. What remained was a young woman looking at him with unmistakable longing. "Don't," she said softly. "Don't tell me we need to maintain boundaries. Don't remind me you're my teacher or that I'm a princess. I already know all the reasons this is impossible." Dorian's resolve wavered. "Then why?" "Because I need to say it anyway." She rose from her chair, moving closer. "These past weeks with you have been the first time I've felt truly seen. Not as a problem to fix or a disappointment to manage, but as myself. And I hope, you feel something too." He did. Heaven help him, he did. Every shared laugh, every moment their hands accidentally brushed over star maps, every time she looked at him with those eyes that seemed to hold entire galaxies, it had all accumulated into feelings he had no right to harbor. "This can't happen," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "I know." She stood before him now, close enough that he could see the slight tremor in her breathing. "But before we go back to pretending, before I'm married off to some diplomatic arrangement and you return to Earth, can we have just one moment of honesty?" The rational part of Dorian's mind screamed warnings about ethics, consequences, the profound betrayal of trust this represented. But a deeper part, the part that had fallen gradually and helplessly for this brilliant, complicated woman, made him stand and close the remaining distance between them. "One moment," he whispered. She reached up, fingers gentle against his face, and kissed him. It was soft and tentative at first, a question more than a statement. Then deeper, as Dorian's hands found her waist and pulled her closer. Around them, stars wheeled through space, indifferent witnesses to a connection that transcended worlds and violated every rule they both understood. When they finally drew apart, both breathing unsteadily, reality crashed back. "We can't," Dorian said, though his hands still rested on her waist. "I know," Raina replied, her forehead pressed against his. "But I'll remember this. Whatever happens, I'll remember." A sound from the doorway made them spring apart. Vanna stood there, her expression unreadable in the dim light. "The guard changes in 5 minutes," she said quietly. If anyone else had walked by. She trailed off, letting the implications hang. Raina's face flushed, but she lifted her chin. "Vanna." "I won't tell Mother," Vanna interrupted. "But you're playing with fire, little sister. Both of you are." Her gaze shifted to Dorian, disappointment clear in her eyes. "I thought you were different. I thought you actually cared about helping us." "I do," Dorian said, shame washing over him. "Then act like it." Vanna turned to leave, then paused. Raina deserves better than to be someone's mistake. After she left, silence stretched between them. "She's right," Raina said finally, wrapping her arms around herself. "This was selfish." Dorian wanted to argue, to say that what he felt was anything but selfish, but he couldn't. He'd crossed a line that should have remained sacred. "I'm sorry." "Don't be sorry for how you feel." Her voice wavered slightly. "Just, be sorry that we can't do anything about it." Choices and futures. The final month arrived with the weight of an ending neither wanted to acknowledge. Dorian maintained professional distance, though it felt like swallowing glass. Raina threw herself into her studies with renewed intensity, as if by proving her growth she could somehow make sense of everything else. Empress Calith noticed the change. During their weekly progress report, She studied Dorian with unsettling perception. "My daughters have transformed," she observed. "Tessia now leads council discussions with both intelligence and empathy. Vanna proposed a cultural initiative that the Senate actually approved. And Raina." The Empress paused. "Raina has become the diplomat I always knew she could be. Whatever you did, Master Vale, it worked." "They did the work themselves," Dorian replied carefully. "I simply provided space for them to grow. Nevertheless, you have my gratitude." She handed him a sealed document. "Your payment, and a recommendation that will open doors throughout the galaxy. You've earned it." The praise felt hollow. Success measured in political advancement seemed meaningless compared to what he was about to lose. The farewell ceremony was scheduled for the following evening, but that afternoon, Raina requested one final private session. Against his better judgment, Dorian agreed. She arrived exactly on time, wearing formal diplomatic robes that made her look older, more remote. "I wanted you to know before the official announcement," she said without preamble. "Ambassador Theron from the Syndicate Worlds has proposed a marriage alliance." Dorian's stomach dropped. And I'm accepting. With conditions." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I negotiated for autonomy in how I fulfill my duties, for the right to maintain my own household, and for continued education. Everything you taught me about advocating for myself, I used it. Raina, if you're doing this because of what happened between us, I'm doing this because it's smart diplomacy and because I'm finally ready to be what my people need." She stepped closer, her voice dropping. "But that doesn't mean I've stopped feeling what I feel. It just means I'm choosing to honor my responsibilities alongside my heart." The maturity in her words made Dorian's chest ache with pride and loss simultaneously. "You've grown so much. Thanks to you." She reached into her robe and pulled out a small package. "I want you to have this." Inside was a painting, Vanna's work, clearly, showing the observatory where they'd kissed, the stars beyond rendered in breathtaking detail. In the corner, barely visible, two figures sat in conversation. "Vanna made it for me, but I think you should keep it. As a reminder that some moments, even impossible ones, matter." Dorian couldn't speak past the tightness in his throat. "I need to ask you something," Raina continued. "In 5 years, when I've established my position and proven myself, when the galaxy isn't watching my every move, if I contacted you then, would you answer?" It was dangerous to even consider. It offered hope where perhaps none should exist. But looking at this woman who'd fought so hard to become herself while still meeting her obligations, Dorian couldn't bring himself to lie. "Yes," he said simply. She smiled then, genuine and bright. "Then this isn't really goodbye, is it? Just, see you later." The farewell ceremony was dignified and appropriate. Empress Calith praised his service. Tessia thanked him with carefully measured words. Vanna hugged him tightly and whispered, "Take care of yourself." Raina stood straight and formal, every inch a princess. "Master Vale, you've given us tools to build our futures. We won't forget." Their eyes met for just a moment filled with everything they couldn't say. As Dorian's transport lifted away from the floating palace, he watched it shrink against Velthra's blue oceans until it disappeared. In his bag, carefully wrapped, Vanna's painting waited. And in his heart, equally carefully guarded, hope waited too. 4 years later, Dorian was advising the Interspecies Cultural Council when a message arrived. The signature was simple: Princess Raina Vale, Ambassador Plenipotentiary. "I believe we have unfinished business to discuss. Are you still interested in collaboration?" He read it 3 times, a smile spreading across his face. Some stories, he'd learned, didn't end. They simply paused, waiting for the right moment to continue. And perhaps, just perhaps, their moment was finally approaching. He began typing his reply.